It is Wednesday, my dudes, which means it is time for another first thoughts and initial impressions video. My name is Pat, and I will be going over the newest characters that were just shown, Hwayoung as well as Bad Cat Armin, as well as discussing a couple other things at the end of the video, kind of give you my 2 cents on them. Do I think they are good? Do I think the stats are good? How do I think they might be built? Things like that will be contained within. As always, there's a lot to discuss, so let's just get right into it, starting with Hwayoung's S3 introduction.
If you can't accept it, let's just fight again. Although it'll turn out the same way. I'll put an end to this. Ultimate! To exceed one's limit is impossible without exerting an extraordinary amount of effort.
So, Hwayoung, I really like her character design. I am a huge fan of brawlers and martial artists in general. I usually gravitate towards them in most games that I play. Especially things like JRPGs, MMOs, and obviously it's one of the main reasons I really like playing fighting games because I just really like the whole martial arts aesthetic. It kind of like fascinates me. So really excited to see this character. Voiceover artist is Gentel Hawkins, who I believe is a relative newcomer. I couldn't find too much information about her, but I really do like how distinct the character sounds overall. So I'm very happy with it, pleasantly surprised about it, and want to see more from her in the future. So, let us move on to talking about the actual character's stats. So, if we take a look at her stat line, she is a fire warrior of the Libra zodiac symbol. She shares a stat line with Luna, so we already can kind of use that to guesstimate where this character is going to be for upper and lower bounds on a lot of stats. It says here that her attack is 1510, so you can already tell right away that the character is going to have some sort of passive or modification to the attack because Luna only has 1100 attack. Again, they share the same stat line, so we know exactly what we're getting. She has 6,226 health, 109 speed, 627 defense, 15% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, 5% dual attack chance, no effectiveness or effect resistance. Imprint releases effectiveness for the team, which is, I guess, alright for specific openers. But you're really going to want that imprint concentration for the same reasons that you wanted it on Senya, other characters that are similar to her. And that'll be apparent when we talk about the S2 passive here in a second, which is Prairie Hawk. The caster cannot trigger a critical hit, but her attack increases by 35 to 50% depending on Malagora. Damage that she suffers from critical hits is decreased by 30%. It does not stack with other damage reduction buffs, and at the start of the battle, she gains a barrier for 1 turn, and that also triggers at the end of her turn as well. The barrier strength is increased proportional to her attack. So let's break it down. Cannot trigger a critical hit, very similar to Senya and Summertime Assyria, and you get a similar bonus of 50% attack, which is huge. So right away, we can tell that this character, because it has similar passive to Senya and similar base attack to Senya, this character is probably going to have around 6,000 attack, which is not nothing. That is not insignificant. So I'm taking 6k as like a baseline for I think this character's attack is going to end up being at. And that will come in to play and be a factor for other things that we talk about in this video. She also has damage suffered from a critical hit decreases by 30%. We talk about all the time on my videos how if you want a character to be successful in PvP as a damage dealer, they need some form of survivability, some way to mitigate damage or keep them on the board longer. We're already off to a good start by having them can't trigger a critical hit passive, because that means we can dump all the excess stats into attack, defense, and health and make the character super bulky. So that's really good to start with. But now we have the Archdemon Shadow damage reduction passive as well, and that's already another character that's very tanky and very hard to get off the board in some matchups. So already really good start. And then the final nail in the coffin, which makes this an absolutely amazing passive in my opinion, is that it essentially has Fallen Cecilia passive but for just herself. So she will start the fight with a barrier and get it at the end of every single turn. So yeah, really strong character overall. The barrier obviously means that the character is going to be very weak to Operator Cigarette. Thankfully, Operator Cigarette is kind of not super played as much right now. She's kind of fringe. I don't really see her that much, and that's largely because Fallen Cecilia isn't really played as much as she used to be, just because the format's just so aggressive right now. So Again, really, really good spot. Just keep an eye out for if you were playing Hwayoung. Operator Cigarette's going to be a very rough matchup for you overall because, again, we benchmarked it from Luna, right? You're never going to outspeed Operator Cigarette. Like 240 realistically is the fastest you can make this character if you're just sacrificing all the bulk. And obviously that's kind of like the floor for where Operator Cigarette is going to be starting at. So just keep that in mind if you're going to end up playing her, or she ends up being a more common character in RTA. You can just kind of rely on Operator Cigarette as an answer for her. So now let's talk about her S3, Emperor's Flaming Strike. You acquire 2 souls upon use, and it has a 3 to 4 turn cooldown depending on Malagora. She dispels all debuffs from herself before she uses the attack, very similar to Celine's Thunderclap before it was changed in this current patch. It also grants her immunity for 2 turns. This next sentence is really important. Penetrates the target's defense, period. I take that to mean this is a 100% defense penetrating move. And that's just from up to this point in the skill. We're not even talking about the other damage scaling portion of the move that is the very end. That's insane. Now, the last portion, when the target's max health is greater than the caster's max health, damage dealt increases proportional to the difference up to 100%. So let's break it down. Having to dispel all debuffs is obviously going to be very, very huge because a lot of people like to pick characters like Briar Witch Assaria and other unbuffable heroes to try to keep you off of having barriers when you're playing Fallen Cecilia. You would assume that people would try to do the same for Hwayoung, especially if people are trying to make her, have no health to really lean in to that extra damage between the difference in health totals. So they kind of had the foresight to be like, well, unbuffable kind of just destroys this character and ruins this character for the way that people probably want to try to play her. So we're going to give her that, and then we're going to give her immunity for 2 turns. 2-turn immunity obviously being very huge. I always talk about it in my videos. 1-turn immunity is decent, but 2-turn immunity really, it crushes a lot of compositions. It really, really is hard for a lot of people to push through that 2-turn immunity. It's pretty big. So now we get to the penetrates the target's defense. If you've ever played Specimen Says, he has a 100% defense penetration, or Watcher Shuri, you know how much damage 100% defense penetration actually is. It is a lot. Spez at like 2800 attack with like 250 crit damage can like outright kill most characters, right? Obviously, Hwayoung can't crit, but she's going to have like 6000 attack. This thing is going to hit like an absolute truck unless the damage multipliers are just absolute garbage on the move. We have to wait and see. But I predict that this move will just outright kill most squishies in the game in one shot. And that's even if she has a really high health total. So you're just basically not capitalizing or cashing in at all on the bonus damage. And that's before we get to this other part. And I can't really comment on what the correct HP total is without seeing the actual multipliers of the move. We found out after Straze came out that around 4000 attack was kind of the sweet spot. That would allow you to kill around 28.5k or less health tanks in one hit, assuming you had an attack buff. So we need to see that multiplier to see where it's at. My gut reaction, my initial thoughts are to put this character somewhere between 16 and 18k health, and then have good defense like 1350 or higher, like we talked about with Senya and how to play Senya. That is where my head is at for this character immediately, because having a 100% defense penetration move is just actually insane, and again will kill a lot of squishies. So if most of the problematic DPS in the format automatically just die to this move and I don't really need a bunch of investment, I would rather just have my character be super bulky and hard to get off the board, because I'm already going to have less health than the tanks that are in the 25, 28k, 30k HP range. I'm probably still one-shotting those as well. I don't really see a reason to go to like 9k when this move already kills like most of the damage threats in the game in one hit, assuming the multipliers are as good as Spez, and his are just kind of like average to begin with. So yeah, really, really good S3 overall. The Soul Burn grants an extra turn. If you've watched my videos, you know how I feel about extra turns. They either are terrible or they're stupid broken. This is probably in the category of stupid broken. So yeah. Next up, let's talk about her basic S1 here, Supersonic Kick. She attacks the enemy with a kick and increases her combat readiness by 10 to 15%, depending on Malagora. If she has a buff, inflicts additional damage proportional to the caster's attack regardless of whether the attack hits. already off to a good start. Combat readiness on the S1 is obviously very good. It's one of the things that makes Landy so good. If this has a really good attack multiplier on it, like 1.2x, then this is pretty much like a money move from just that onwards. If the caster is buffed, it inflicts additional damage proportional to the attack, regardless of whether it hits. This is basically just like Spear of a New Dawn on Senya versus something like Violet. So even if Violet dodges, he's still going to take a ton of damage from this move. This is a really strong S1. Like Senya S1 into Spear is what makes that character super good. This character just has a better version of that as her S1. She has essentially a different version of Senya's S2 as well. Passive, you still get the huge boost to attack. You still get some form of survivability. Hers is obviously going to be 30% crit damage reduction as opposed to having the crit resist like Senya has. And then she has the barriers as well from Fallen Cecilia, who's been a meta unit for a while. And then the S3 is just a huge nuke like Straze or Watcher Shuri or Specimen Says in that category. And those are usually in demand. They're usually fairly good. So this character just feels like a greatest hits from a lot of different characters. She just has damage reduction passive from a character like ADS that's already played, basic attacks like Senya, character that's played, one-shotting like Watcher Shuri and Straze, which are characters that are played. So the character, just from a cursory glance, feels like something that's for sure going to see play. I think I would put her around the level of Zahak, where I think the character will kind of be there, and you will see her from time to time, but I don't think she'll be a mainstay. I don't think she has what it takes to be like tier 1. You'll see her like every match. I just don't know if she can kill a character like Apocalypse Ravi. If she actually has the ability to do it, if her multipliers are good, and she could consistently kill something like Apocalypse Ravi or like a Bellion in one hit, then yeah, this character will definitely see quite a bit of play. But I'm kind of like lowering my expectations. I personally think the character is great, but I'm trying to be realistic. I don't know. I think I would say probably like a tier 2 character for those of you that actually follow PvP. Something you would see every couple of games, but not something you're going to see every single game. So let's move on to the artifact, which is Indestructible Gators. I don't think I ever thought I would say the word Gators again, at least as far as footwear. Not since Herald's Gators in Final Fantasy XI have I actually had to think about Gators a lot. So yeah, this is a really interesting artifact. It increases her attack by 10% as a flat bonus. And then if she lands a non-critical hit when using a single target attack, she has a 50 to 100% chance, depending on artifact level, to inflict a burn, and the burn can only be activated once per turn. The flat 10% attack cannot be underestimated. This will most likely apply to the attack percentage on Hwayoung's passive. If you think of it like Senya's imprints that she gets from having extra copies, that is applied to the Senya passive to get the overall total number, right? So this 10% attack is going to end up being like an extra 110-ish attack that is going to then be multiplied by the passive. So it's a lot of attack, a lot of free attack on this actual artifact, and it has 273 attack as well as its base, which is the highest that you can actually have on an artifact. So this gives a ton of attack, which is what this character wants, because it means more damage on the S3 and the S1, and just in general. The bonus damage on the S1 is going to be hit significantly harder, and the barriers that you have are going to be significantly bigger. It's flexible. It's really, really important, I think, to have percentage attack stacking on a character like this. And then we get to talking about the fact that it gives the burn stack, and that's huge. If you have ever played Carrot at 4,800 attack or higher in any capacity, you know that those burns just melt people, absolutely destroy characters. So when we take a look here at a 6k attack character with burns, those burns are going to do massive chunks of damage to any character that it actually hits. I wouldn't be surprised if you started a fight with a soul burn on her, one-shot a tank or something, or like a mid-sized character, and then S1'd another character, and applied the bonus damage from the supersonic kick and the burn stack from Indestructible Gators, and then it becomes their turn and they immediately die from the burn. It's like a 5k damage burn. I'll put the formula for burn up here on your screen so you can see it and kind of like realize just how much damage is actually going to be coming out of this burn stack. I do think this is the best option for the character, and if you somehow don't pull a bunch of copies and can't make it consistent, If you've been a veteran player who's been around for a while, Uberius' Tooth will probably also be fairly good on this character because when you S1, you'll get the bonus damage from not only the move, but the bonus damage from the Tooth, and that's going to really hurt. And I think if you play her on Tooth, she's kind of like a specialist that's just designed to destroy dodge units. So overall, Hwayoung just feels like a good character. Again, like I said, tier 2 character. I don't think she's broken enough to be a tier 1, but like I'm very happy with this release. Character's aesthetic looks great. Character's moves look really flashy and cool. Has a defined niche. Seems like she has uses, specific use cases in matchups, which was what we're looking for. And she doesn't feel oppressive or broken, right? And that's a huge relief because lately Smoggy has just been giving us these characters that just absolutely feel like they just take all the fun out of the game. So I'm really, really happy with this character, and I'll definitely be rolling to get her. I have enough to at least pity her. Hopefully I could get a couple of copies of her and her artifact for sure. So now let's move on to the other character that was shown today, which is Bad Cat Armin. As always, we will start with the preview here.
Watch and learn, kitten. You and I are worlds apart. I'm the star of this show. The winner of this tournament is going to be me, 'cause I bought off all the judges.
Alright, so Bad Cat Armin is a dark warrior. She is voiced by Olivia Hack, who you obviously know from the other Armins that are in the game. But if you did not know, she also voices characters like Ty Lee in Avatar: The Last Airbender, as well as Xion from the Xenosaga games, if you've ever played any of those. So, the first thing to point out on this character is that she is a warrior and not a knight, and I think that is actually... she is worse off for it. I think that this is a character that if she was a knight, she'd be absolutely insane. And it wouldn't surprise me if this character originally was designed as a knight, and then they moved it over to a warrior because they're like, oh man, we really can't make another broken ML4 star. We can't afford another Angel of Light Angelica fiasco. So they've kind of like scaled it back. I feel like it went with a warrior. When we look at the kit, you'll realize that the biggest problem, I think, with the stat line is actually the health being too low and the speed not really mattering a whole heck of a lot. So having the 115 base speed that she has is feels honestly kind of wasted. Like, the character can go reasonably fast. Like, you can get this character like to 280, 290 speed if you really push it. Obviously, it won't have any bulk, but like the character's pretty fast for what otherwise would have been a knight. But just the health is like, oof, I really don't like it. So yeah, looking at the other stats, 912 attack, kind of low. 5,871 health, again, kind of low. I really wish this character had like 6,500 plus. 115 speed. 614 defense is solid. That is usually average for where I want a warrior. If it was a knight, I'd want this to be higher, like 650. 15% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, 5% dual attack chance, no effectiveness or effect resistance. Imprint releases attack for the team, which is really good and synergistic with the actual kit. And the imprint concentration is critical hit chance. And I do think there is a world where this character does want some amount of damage. So having the best damage concentration, imprint concentration, super, super useful. So now let's talk about her S2 passive, which I think is going to be a mainstay for things like arena defense, Guild War defense, and could possibly even push her into RTA. It is Catch 'em. After being attacked, she has a 30 to 40% chance, depending on Malagora, to increase the critical hit chance of the character in the front row for one turn, and makes the front row character issue a counterattack with their S1. This skill cannot be triggered by extra attacks or counterattacks. So, basically, it's kind of like a different version of Elber's Ritual Sword, at least when you think about it in the context of AoE. If your opponent has a lot of AoEs, you'll constantly be triggering Catch 'em, and that will allow the S1 character to just kind of unload with their S1. In the video, they show Landy, who obviously Landy has a very good S1 because of the combat readiness push, the above average damage, the fact that it fills up the Chief is on the scene passive, and it enables the S3 to come off cooldown faster. So that's a very good one, but Landy in general is not built super bulky, so she's probably going to die like in like 1 or 2 hits even from AoEs. So that's one of those ones where not super keen on it, but there are some that I am very keen on, like Bellion seems like really insane because she's very difficult to get off the board, and she synergizes super well with the S1 on Bad Cat Carmen. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Obviously, Apocalypse Robbie or any other like crazy hard-hitting, difficult-to-kill bruiser seems insane because those characters will crack back for a ton of damage, and they are very difficult to get off the board. And they don't really want to be attacking Bad Cat Armin a lot because then it's just going to keep triggering that S1 from that character in the front. Perhaps one of the ones that's the most toxic, though, is Spectre Tenebria because you can't actually get to her, so you're going to have to AoE anyway, and that means that the Spectre is just going to be letting a ton of S1s fly on this character. So I can see a lot of really degenerate compositions, especially, again, in Guild War and Arena Defense built entirely around this skill. I would not surprise me if, like, the meta defense after this character came out in Guild Wars was, like, Bad Cat Armin, counter set Apocalypse Robbie in the front, and like Conqueror Lilius or like another like crazy insanely strong character on the side as well to help them out. It just feels so good. So now let's look at the S3, which is this it? Nyahaha. You acquire 3 souls upon use, and it has a 4 to 5 turn cooldown depending on Mulligora. It is a single target attack that grants Bad Cat Armin an increase to speed for 2 turns, as well as grants a barrier to all allies for 2 turns. Damage dealt and barrier strength increases proportional to caster's max health. Really good skill. Obviously, again, we talk about how it has lower health from being a warrior. If this was on a knight, man, that'd just be a huge fat barrier. Speed buff is very good. It synergizes really well with her high base speed, especially for a warrior. So yeah, that's obviously very good. It's just a protection skill that does a good chunk of damage. The Soul Burn allows you to essentially decrease the skill cooldown, for 2 turns, which means that this move can be used off cooldown like every other turn. It's a fine Soul Burn overall. I do think this is a good move. It's not like insane, but it is a good move. It does, we'll have to see the multipliers on it because that's really going to dictate where we take this character in terms of stats. Like, this is the only other damage move besides the S1, and the S1 it becomes very apparent what set we're going to be playing the character on, but we don't really have anything to go off of for where we want the stats. Like, do we want this to be like all bulk, no damage? Do we want this to be some bulk, some damage? We really have to see the damage multipliers on this move. But off the rip, just giving yourself speed buff is good. Barrier for everyone on your team is very, very good. And then finally, we come to the S1, which is Are You Ready? If it will attack the enemy with a giant shield and inflicts injuries. Injuries are basically 5% on this, and obviously it's going to reduce their max health and all that, whatnot, right? When it is the caster's turn, Are You Ready changes it to an attack that targets all enemies. So it's an AoE injury attack on the S1. If it is an AoE attack from the change to it, it cannot trigger a dual attack. So this is very reminiscent of Bellion's S1 with injury set. So this character is almost assuredly going to be on injury set, and we go back to talking about Bellion from the S2 passive, right? So if this character is going to be inflicting 11% injuries on every S1, and every time you hit her with an AoE attack or you focus her down, right, it's going to trigger the Bellion counter, which if she's on injury as well, that's really going to compound. Now, there is obviously a weakness of this because Injury Bellion gets just heavily focused, like singled out really quickly, so she can't proc Elbrus Ritual Sword, and she can't counter because she's not on counter set. So it might not be as good as I'm thinking it is, just because, again, the Injury Bellions are usually hyper-focused with single target attacks, which basically renders this dead. But like counter Apocalypse Robbie with this feels really, really dumb because not only are you doing the 11% injuries on the S1 every single time it is her turn, but if they are attacking her or AoEing, they risk Apocalypse Robbie cracking them for huge amounts of damage and also having the injuries. And if she's on counter set, that could even come more frequently. It just, overall, it lends itself to like those like cheesy injury strategies that you've seen in the past. And just the injury like set on this with this actual move and the S2 passive just seems very, very, very frightening to me. So I do think that, again, this character will see play. I just think it's largely going to be arena defense and Guild War defense, and we'll see where she goes from that. Not broken like Angel of Light Angelica, but definitely a very, very good character. I think it is more likely you will see Bad Cat Armin, at least, again, being played on things like defenses and Guild Wars, than you might see Hwayoung. Hwayoung is a role player, but this is a character that literally establishes whole entire compositions, and I think that is more powerful. in the end. So those are my thoughts on the characters. Let's quickly do some roundups and talk about other things that were shown today. If you for sure should be trying to pick up for this new Valentine's event, the Empress and Emperor artifacts. They are super, super important in my opinion. I really think that you should get these and start investing in them. So the Empress increases your attack by 6 to 12% depending on level. And at the start of the battle, when anyone on the team is granted the effect of the Emperor, which is the companion artifact, they also get a defense increase. This artifact skill can only apply to one hero within a team. So now you're asking, why am I saying should you pick this up? It doesn't seem super important. Anything that increases attack percentage by a flat amount is usually incredibly strong for making one-shot compositions in Hunt. So Empress can replace a thing like Super Water Gun Shooter or something like Card of Small Miracles. Yes, those affect the whole team, but they don't give as much attack as something like this. There are people who play Warhorn specifically just for having the 10% or higher attack to be able to clear specific hunts in a timely fashion, to clear them very, very quickly. And now, when you take a look at the Emperor, really, really quickly here, it has the opposite effect, where it increases the defense by 12%, but if somebody is wearing the Empress, then it increases the attack by 12% as well. So essentially, if you have Emperor and Empress on two characters on your team, you will get 24% attack and 24% defense on the character. So having that be on strategic one-shot characters like, say, maybe like a Sigret or a Commander Lorena or anything like that, right? That is a lot of extra damage that can go out. So I do think that both of these in tandem will be used in compositions for things like Hall of Trials and hunts in the future in order to achieve very quick clears or very high scores. So that's why I think it's really important. Don't skimp on these. I know some of my guildmates skip out on like PvE artifacts because they're just like, I don't like the side story. The artifact is whatever. It's junk. I'm telling you right now, these are not junk. They will probably be used in some form of farming in the future. They will make some kind of composition possible. 24% attack on two separate units is too difficult or like too high to actually be ignored. So now let us talk about the Guilty Gear Strive collab, which is coming back. I think they said it was in April. We are getting one new hero. I just wanted to kind of throw my 2 cents in about who I think it could actually end up being. I think there are 3 very real possibilities that we could get. The first of which is Ino. I think that is the most likely character that we will end up getting because most of you who have never played Guilty Gear are at least familiar with her from the original collab. She already has kind of like the foundation laid for her, and the rapport is built with the actual player base in the first place. And spoiler alert, when we'll be talking about this and how to play Bellion in just a day or two, Bellion's Japanese voice is the same as Ino's voice, and Bellion just got her JP voice relatively recently, within the past couple like months or so. So it wouldn't surprise me if they just slid the actress into the booth and were like, do the lines for Bellion, do the lines for Ino. And then they just kind of like, waited until it came back around. It was opportune and fit into the schedule. So Ino is the clear choice right now, in my opinion, for who they would end up picking. After that, my second best guess is Ramlethal Valentine, because is a waifu. So people, if you don't know, waifus usually sell a lot more in gacha games. So usually it's going to be skewed towards females. You're most likely going to get a female character for your Guilty Gear Strive last round. I know that seems kind of like dumb because there are a lot of really cool guys, like characters like Faust, Potemkin, Leo. Those are like all really cool characters. I don't think it's going to be any of them. I would really like it to be Nagoriyuki. He's a really sick character from Strive. Just super badass character in general. But I don't think it will be Husbando. And if it is, well, it's probably going to be the third character that we'll be talking about. But yeah, Ramlethal Valentine is probably the second most likely character because, again, you have the rapport. You guys already know who Elfelt Valentine is. Ramlethal is her sister. And she is a very, very heavily used character in Guilty Gear Strive. She is one of the most played characters in the game. So it would not surprise me if Ramlethal Valentine was also the pick. And then my third pick, the character I think it could be, is Kai Kisuke, because he's the other main character of Guilty Gear. Is always been Soul Bad Guy and Kai Kisuke. They're basically like Ryu and Ken from Street Fighter. They are pretty much always together. I think this is the only gacha game that Guilty Gear has ever collabed with where Kai Kisuke is not a playable character. It is always Soul and Kai first, and then you get characters like your Baikins and your Dizzies. right? So it's going to be one of those three, in my opinion. I would love to be pleasantly surprised. I would like to see a character like Nagoriyuki, or to see a character like Giovanna, who is another new waifu that was introduced in Guilty Gear Strive, kind of as a way to entice people or get newer players into the franchise. She's kind of like an introductory character for those fans that are trying to pick up Guilty Gear. So maybe she could also be one, because obviously if you don't play Guilty Gear already and you see Giovanna in the game, you might be inclined to want to pick up Guilty Gear Strive and try Giovanna, who's one of the most simple characters you can actually play in that game. So that's going to be everything here today in this video. As always, enjoy the rest of your day and look forward to how to play Bellion, which will be coming sometime in the next couple of days. Later.